Hello, this is Lewis from Vera Filosofia, and today I want to share with you a technique to help you think more clearly and objectively about your life so that you can take better decisions. So let's get started. Um, we've all been or found ourselves in situations where we, for one or another reason, actually for some unknown reason, we couldn't think clearly about things. We had to make a hard choice. We didn't know what we wanted, but we had to figure something out. And after worrying and giving this thing much thought, we somehow felt like we didn't know what was going on, what the best thing or course of action might be. And so some of us naively go to friends or relatives and we ask them for their opinion. We tell them about this problem that we're having, about this situation, and they go ahead and tell us what it is that they think. And funnily enough, in most cases, something that makes you very, very confused, when you give it to someone else, they respond immediately like, well, it's very obvious. It's this and this and this, and it's this way, and I think the best thing you could do is this. Not all of the time, but you are astonished about the certainty that people can have about this subject, which just gives you an absolute headache. And if you care to ask more than one person about this, you will have gotten more than one answer, which added to your already confused mind just creates more and more confusion. And in the end, what often happens is that we end up doing the thing we knew we were going to do from the very beginning. You said like, okay, I'm going to abstain from doing this thing, from talking to this person, from whatever, while I figure this out. And in the end, you get very confused or and stuff, and you end up doing this thing, even though you said you wouldn't, because you have no real reason not to do it. And so, the first thing I want to talk about in regards to this is King Solomon's paradox. This is a paradox story I got from a book called The Rudest Book Ever. Absolute recommendation, probably one of my top 10 favorite books. Um, and the paradox goes something like this. There used to be this ancient king of Israel called King Solomon. And he was a very wise king who was famous for giving people very good advice about their lives. So people went and he gave them pieces of advice and they did as he told them, and everything worked out all right. Paradoxically, however, his own life was an absolute bloody mess. And so the paradox basically teaches us that human beings are very good at giving other people advice and at seeing other people's problems as objective, but we are absolutely terrible at seeing our own problems and solving our own situations. And we may ask ourselves, why? And the answer to this question is, of course, that what stands in the way of seeing our situation, our problems clearly, is our emotions. When you are trying to think about these things, you're not thinking in pure concepts. You can't be objective because you yourself are involved. And so your emotions, your biases, your wishes, your desires, your fears, they all somehow play a role. There's too many interests, there's too many things, you're too involved. And so there's a really good technique, which even though you might have already heard about it, and I certainly had from different sources, I recently realized how good it is by trying it out. And so the way by which you can approach these things, these problems better, is simply by, how can you put it? By distancing yourself from them. Now, what does this mean? What does this mean? The best way I know to do it, and is to imagine a scene, a scenario, and you're going to play a little bit of a dialogue, and you imagine that your situation, your exact same problem, is told to you by a friend. So say, for example, that you have a problem with your girlfriend or your boyfriend or whatever. And whatever problem you are facing, you imagine this person telling you, well, the thing is that we fight too much and we're always disagreeing on this and this and that. You tell them the thing, they're telling you the same thing you're suffering, and it's just so strange how something that you couldn't make heads or tails when it comes to you, when even someone imaginary tells you about it, you can engage with the problem a lot more objectively because you're not technically involved. It's coming from the outside. You can be objective because this is no longer part of the subject, rather from the object. And so you may think, well, isn't that just the same as me telling someone else my problems and then them giving me the advice that I need? And first of all, no, I don't think so. First, because it's best to be self-sufficient. You want to be able to make your own decisions, come to your own conclusions, and decide what you're going to do on your own. Not only so that you can take responsibility for it, but so that you can be responsible for your life. Like, first of all, you won't have a scapegoat to go like, oh, I just did what he told me, so no. You need to take responsibility for your life because it's yours to live. Second of all, the problem is that when you're telling someone else the whole problem, all of the details, like when you're telling someone else about your problems, it's hard for you to transmit the whole context and all of the details and all of the things that create or constitute this thing so that they can come to a good conclusion. Like, it's very hard, unless it's very hard. So when you do this exercise with yourself, all the information that you're projecting onto the other person is the exact same information you have. You have all of the data that you have, unless there's something that you don't know, and you have all of the information, and the only thing you're doing is looking at it from another perspective. Something additional that you can do is perhaps think about it from different perspectives. Yes, your own, so to speak, someone else's, but also different people. How would it look like if someone from the other sex gave you the exact same story, but like the other way around? Or if it was your parents or someone else? Maybe this will give you a more complete understanding. And now, this is like the most important part of this technique, is that you actually have to sit down and imagine it. And it takes imagination to imagine this, to go through this dialogue, first of all. And second is that even if you sit down and think about it for a while, if you imagine this dialogue and stuff, very often you'll realize that, yeah, you're thinking about it, but you're not really coming to any conclusions. You're not really coming to anything. And so what's important is that through this talk, you come to certain conclusions. You need to set yourself as a goal practical advice that you're going to give yourself to follow. So rather than just being like, oh yes, well, the best thing that you could do is and give yourself some vague instructions, what you need to do is something that you can write down, something that you can enunciate, something that you can say, so that in the end, even if you don't remember the whole explanation, the whole thought process, or the whole thought about what this thing is and what it means and why it happened and if this person's right or if you're wrong and what's the right course of action, you need to have very clear in your mind what it is that you need to do, what it is that needs to happen, and what will happen if you don't. Because action in the end is all about motives. Hopefully I'll do another video on this, but motives is a very interesting, deep, but very long subject. So it's all about motives. And so you need to give yourself a good motive to counteract your desire or fear to do the thing that's necessary to be done. If you need to go have a talk with a person and tell them the truth about something that's going on rather than lying to them or avoiding it, that's what you need to do. And so I guess what I'm trying to tell you is that yes, first you need to think about this objectively. You need to come to certain conclusions, practical conclusions, but then you also need a plan of action. Now, you can't foresee everything that's going to happen, obviously, but you need a plan of action, certain things that you have to and that you're going to stick to no matter what. Of course, there are exceptions. This is important. This whole thing is important because as animals, as natural beings, we are hardwired for short-term pleasure, to do the things that are the most comfortable and will make us feel the safest, because this strategy helps us in nature to get the food that's there, take the risk to take the food, or to run away, or to avoid an uncomfortable situation because it might lead to our death. But in the cultural context that we've created so far, living for the short term is always, absolutely always, going to be the end of you. And that's probably something I'll do a video about. But the fact is that when you're finding yourself, to tie all this together, when you find yourself in these situations where you're confused, you don't know what to do, and in the end, you go with the first thing you knew you were going to do. You just follow your emotions, the impulses. These are, most of the time, the worst things you can do. They feel good. It's liberating to somehow express this. Or maybe it's just comfortable, or it gets rid of the discomfort. But you need to think this through, and you need to do so objectively to know what the hell you're doing. Otherwise, you might feel very good, as we often do with short-term planning, or no planning at all, which is short-term thinking, which is no thinking at all. But the consequences are sure to follow. So, yeah, do this. I hope this technique works. Oh yeah, and something I forgot to mention is just how you really. Oh yeah, the thing is that when most people, I guess, unless it's only been me who was never taught this, but we haven't been taught this way of thinking and approaching problems. And so you might be very bad at the beginning. This is something that probably needs practice, something that you need to do over and over again to get the hang of it. Not only the visualization part of imagining a scenario that feels it realistic enough that you're engaging with someone else, but the actual trying to extrapolate the position to someone else and then thinking about the position from an outside perspective, coming to conclusions. It's a very different way of thinking if you're used to contemplating or processing things just logically. So I would encourage you to try this out throughout the weeks when you need to take decisions, when you need to go through stuff. Try this out. Just imagine that the same situation you're in, someone else is telling you, and you might be able to come with very good advice. Or just, yeah, something to comfort yourself sometimes. Like when you're very sad and you think that everything's going to shit, if you imagine a friend telling you that, or when you think like, oh, I'm just such a bad person, I'm just a failure, or whatever. When we engage with ourselves, sometimes we're too hard. We go like, no, we beat ourselves up because we're feeling unworthy, because we feel like we failed. And if it were a friend you were engaging with, you'd probably be a lot kinder, you'd be more objective, and you'd be encouraging. So that's another big benefit, that through this technique you can engage with yourself as if you were your own friend. And I can honestly tell you it feels very good, but it needs practice. So I encourage you to try this out. If you find value in it, integrated into your decision-making process. And yeah, I think I'll leave it here because otherwise this will get too long. But hopefully you'll derive some value from it. Do comment if you've done something like this before, or after you've tried it, if it's worked for you, if you think it's absolute rubbish, if I missed something, I'd love to hear that. So yeah, Thanks for listening. Like, subscribe, and have a good one. Bye.